Mm. I used to wake before the sunrise, but these days I seem to let the time just slide by. But that's time, and every day is filled up to spilling the brim. But abruptly I thought of you, no gain in dread. You rest your head. I used to know my older sister, but I think when someone leaves, you just got memories. And you know how somebody old always says to take it all slow. Well, too bad that we kids never learn. Someone once said, you rest your head. And that's why today I'm stopping to walk out in the rain. The yellow grass like light across the plain. And I'm just kind of thinking of when we'd walk here all around, way back when you still lived in the South. I hear the birds until the morning. Sometimes there are things that keep me from sleeping, like when you're away in the night. Then I hear a car pulling up. I get up and notice it's you. Go back to bed. I rest my head. I rest my head. Mm-hmm. After the storms have gone, the sky hangs vast and sunless. Wreckage of one more year in clouds of light surrounds us. The thing that's so wrong now was there before. I saw clearly at the time, but stayed the course.
All right, let's get it.
Okay. And we are live here for a little Coffee in the Crusades. Let's take that pinned comment down. All right. Well, welcome, guys, to another Coffee in the Crusades, right here on the Real Crusades History live streaming channel. What do we do here? Well, we talk about medieval history and Crusades history and whatever you guys feel like talking about. So it's audience driven. So that means that you guys come up with questions, come up with topics, and we'll go from there. So we're doing this again every Tuesday. Here's my coffee. I'm ready to go. Knights Templar. I don't know. Do you guys like when you get up in the morning
are you thinking to yourself, all right, I'm going to get my coffee now? Like that's kind of the first big exciting moment of the day, making some coffee and then drinking 10 cups of it while you work on YouTube videos. Okay, so yeah, I'm very close to having my new Richard the Lionheart documentary done. It's over an hour in length, and it's going to be about his imprisonment and then release, his ransoming. So Tom Jensen says when he gets up, he thinks, oh, yeah, you know what? I'm actually not like that. I'm a morning person, so I get up and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hit the computer and start working. Grabbing my coffee is kind of my big moment. But some people, yeah, they don't want to get up. My wife is one of those people. One of my kids is a morning person. The other one is just like my wife and doesn't want to get up. So my daughter, she gets up, she comes skipping down the stairs. Morning, Daddy. And she's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. My son's kind of like growling at us and telling us to go away when we go and get him out of bed. So, okay, well, here we are. Bleak says, I work nights. I used to do that. I worked night shift for quite a while at one point, and I was not very, very good at it. I'm amazed at how, well, I mean, at the time, it seemed like I was good at it. If I try to do it now, it wouldn't work. It's amazing the things you can do in your 20s. Just, stay up all night. Okay, let's get into some questions here. So Jonathan Phelps says, when are more episodes of Knights of the Cross coming out? So kind of the plan with that is Austin and I are going to do one more crowdfunding push for one more episode of Knights. That's kind of where we feel like we are at this point. You guys hopefully have seen the first episode. The next one is going to be about the Battle of Jaffa. It's going to be the main backdrop for the story. And the goal is to we're going to do 3 months of crowdfunding starting actually next month. I'm going to start streaming every Friday night from May to the end of July. In fact, I hope you guys will join me on, let's see, May 5th. Our good buddy Rand is going to be with us for a stream about Henry V and the Battle of Agincourt, which is something I've been really interested to start looking at. So that's going to be our final push. We're going to do those 3 months, raise what we can, and then whatever we raise, we're going to make that second episode, and that's going to be it for Knights of the Cross for now. So it's kind of the last hurrah for Knights. But I'm confident we're going to make something pretty cool. Which, the Battle of Jaffa is certainly, justified as a topic. So I hope you guys will join me for those streams. And, if you haven't contributed yet, you will do so. Speaking of which, I guess I should put up the Knights of the Cross website here for everybody to check out. And then we'll get back to questions, regular questions. So that is, let's see here. knightsofthecross.com. All right, you guys can check this out. Talks a little bit about the fact that we're going to be doing Richard versus Saladin, the Battle of Jaffa. We've got our crew. We've got everything we need. We just need to put a little budget aside, and we will do that second and final episode of Knights of the Cross. So anyway, let's get into some questions. I appreciate you guys being here. We generally have such a great group of people who join for this stream. All right. Let's see here. Look at all these great questions already. Let's see. Let's see here. Tom, is it possible some of the Templars relocated to Switzerland? And if so, could that explain why the Pope chose Swiss guards to protect him, secretly Templars serving as the Pope's bodyguards? Interesting question, Tom. The answer is, we don't know. I mean, there has been so much speculation over the years about, okay, well, what happened to the Templars after they were disbanded? Nobody knows. I mean, a lot of them did join the Knights of St. John, the Hospitallers. But of course, this is the big basis for so many of the rather wild conspiracy theories about the Templars, that they became the Freemasons, or they founded a secret society that then went on to, the Assassin's Creed is kind of based on the idea that these were the founding fathers of America were secret Knights Templar, right? I think all of that is pretty outlandish. I would imagine that plenty of them went into areas of military service. Some of them did leave, the religious life, or you have to be a priest for it to be officially religious life. I guess the monastic life would be the way to put it. A fair number of them did stop doing that and, went to a more secular type of life. And I would imagine that with the profession, the knightly profession, plenty of them would have, become soldiers, become mercenaries, Swiss Guard, maybe. I don't know. Okay, more questions here. Appreciate you guys being here. It's always fun. Tom says, why did the Pope never visit the Holy Land during the Crusades? Well, it's kind of interesting. Popes and kings generally did not leave their domain. In fact, crusading was one of the few times that people like the King of France or the King of England would, actually leave their kingdom. We do have in Spain, it happened more often, maybe because you would have different kings crusading together, like Las Navas de Tolosa, the King of Aragon and the King of Navarre showed up in Castile to help with that. The Pope had a lot going on, at any given time. And somebody like that was going to be very much in demand and have a pretty full schedule. So I could imagine it would be tough for them to leave the Vatican. But yeah, that's a good question, Tom. I don't know exactly why, but I think that's kind of a good hint as to why. Interestingly, none of the kings of Jerusalem, after the First Crusade, that is, left the Kingdom of Jerusalem or left the Holy Land. They, like Baldwin IV, lived his whole life in Outremer. He never saw France or, the Latin West. It was just a concept in his mind. That's kind of interesting to think when you think about how close the ties were, back in the West for the Crusader states. And yet there were plenty of people who lived their entire life in a place like the Kingdom of Jerusalem or the Principality of Antioch. Maybe would have actually had more occasion to travel to some of the neighboring Muslim territories rather than, back in the West. All right. Tom asks, did the Templars participate in the Northern Crusades like the Teutonic Knights? Not in any large numbers, as far as I know. Tanner says, Battle of Agincourt, love the armor of the early 15th century. Exactly, yeah. I've been kind of getting interested in Henry V. He reminds me a lot of Richard the Lionheart. He's kind of the 15th century Richard the Lionheart. He was both a great king and a great warrior, a great general. And they were similar personalities. They both died young, I think about the same age. Their death was kind of a tragedy for England in both cases. Henry kind of was taking up the task that Richard had given himself of, restoring Normandy, although pretty much all of the French domains were gone by the time of Henry V. So, but he conquered Paris, didn't he? I mean, the Battle of Agincourt, they kind of wiped out the French, and basically all of France was open to them. But you have this early death of Henry V, and that's what eliminates the possibility of really the English just conquering France, as far as I can tell. I've been kind of starting to read some more about it. You guys might find this funny, but I don't read a lot about the late Middle Ages. and I'm kind of starting to remedy that. I've gotten to where I'm really interested in just England itself and wanting to really kind of get the full picture of England, even into the late Middle Ages. I got this really great book on the way, actually, by John Gillingham, one of my favorite scholars, who did this awesome history of England. Well, it looks awesome. I haven't read it yet, but it's from 1066 to like the mid 1400s. So kind of an era I would really like to kind of, mostly the Plantagenet era to kind of get a feel for that. Tony, this is interesting. Tony says, I am sure there was a pope who visited the Holy Land in the Middle Ages, but I'm not sure which pope and when. That's interesting, Tony. I thought that was not the case. In fact, my understanding was that no pope had gone to the Holy Land, especially, I mean, the Crusades era would be the obvious time when that could happen. But as far as I know, that did not happen. Anyway. Okay. Tom, was Godfrey the most popular and respected leader of the First Crusader army? At the time, it was probably Bohemond. Like right at that time, he was probably the most famous and widely regarded. Over time, Godfrey's legend kind of grew, and he became this larger-than-life figure. Okay. Lambert, our good buddy Lambert. And by the way, guys, is the audio okay? I think you guys probably would have told me if it wasn't, but I think I kind of bumped up the audio a little bit on my mic there. So, Lambert, I recently learned that during the Albigensian Crusade, the church referred to the burning of the Cathars as burnt offerings to God. Thoughts on this? I'm not sure that's true. In fact, I'd be kind of surprised if that was true. That sounds more like some of the lore that would have surrounded it. Where did you hear that, Lambert? That would be very interesting. I know there's plenty of room for doubt about the quote, the famous quote from the papal legate who was present at some of the big sieges, where he said something like, "Burn them all. God will find his own," or something like this. Zenek says, since RCH deals with modern perspectives on the Crusades, Jay, how do you feel about what the church has said about the Crusades and claims that popes apologized for them? As far as I know, John Paul II apologized for the Fourth Crusade, but I don't think there was ever an apology for the Crusades in general. I think that the popes have tended to have a bit more of a sophisticated historical understanding of the Crusades, as far as I know. Which it would be kind of kooky to apologize for something that is just so obviously a natural part of the landscape of the High Middle Ages. I mean, we've kind of talked about this in the past, but I mean, warfare having a religious element to it was just a universal. Crusading was one aspect of it. It was one manifestation of it, but it was certainly something that was found in Byzantium and Islam and pretty much all of the great Mediterranean civilizations of the time. So let's check out some more questions here. I thought I was going to sneeze there for a second. All right. I generally hit mute when I cough, or try to. Did the Byzantines ever develop military orders similar to the Templars? No. Again, kind of very different perspectives on warfare from the Crusaders and the Byzantines. But the Byzantines did have a religious dimension to their warfare. You guys may recall that they carried icons into battle. If I'm not mistaken, and somebody can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but there was even a practice of painting icons onto shields. Is that correct? In fact, that would be kind of something that would be interesting to explore. To what extent what was the nature of the religious aspect of military culture in Byzantium? Because there's often this overemphasis on the idea that, well, I mean, the Byzantines didn't have crusading. That didn't make any sense to them. And I think that's true, in terms of the institutions that the Latins had, especially because, in the Latin West, the church was its own entity. And in Byzantium, the church and the empire were kind of one thing. So there was such an emphasis on the Crusaders' vow in the Latin West, taking up this vow that's dispensed by the church. The church is the one that calls the crusade. Whereas I think in Byzantium, the emperor himself is kind of this religious leader who leads an army, which is essentially God's army. I mean, the empire is God's empire, leads that empire into battle. And there is an element of religious expression in that, acting on behalf of God, or acting toward the good. If there's anybody who has a little bit more of a handle on this topic, I would love to hear about it. Because obviously, like I was saying, I would actually be interested to see a more in-depth analysis of this. Because when you hear about this, you always just hear about how, oh, well, I mean, the Byzantines didn't have crusading, Okay, fair enough. But to act like the Byzantine perspective on warfare was not akin to a modern perspective, where it's kind of this purely non-religious thing. It was religion informed everything in this period. And I definitely think it's fair to say that it informed the way the Byzantines, thought of their own military campaigns. I mean, there was an element of, we want God's favor in this, if especially like the good of the empire was the empire was sort of God's vehicle in the world. I mean, these are profound concepts that I don't think we can overlook this and just pretend that everything for the Byzantines was just pure politics. I don't think that's accurate. Oh, and here's a nice comment from Tom. He says, Why is the Heathen Rage? Awesome work by J. Stephen Roberts. Yeah, guys, if you haven't checked out my historical novel, The Crusades, and thank you, Tom. It's called Why is the Heathen Rage? It's available on Amazon. At some point, I want to modify it a bit, but that's for another day. Right now, I'm actually finishing up a book about the Third Crusade, or set during the Third Crusade, which is going to be out this year. It is done. I'm just kind of doing the nitpicky edits on it. So that's always a good place to be with a book, because actually bringing the thing into existence is pretty tough. But then once you've actually got a physical book fully there in front of you, it's a lot easier to kind of go through it and just kind of fix the problems or flesh things out that need to be fleshed out, or whatnot. So yeah, check out that novel. Appreciate that, Tom. It's set in the Kingdom of Jerusalem in the 1120s. Baldwin II and Queen Melisande. I think maybe one of the few historical fiction books that kind of takes up that topic. Okay. Oh wow, we're getting. I'm going to go longer than noon 30 today, because I had to start off with some music there, because I was going downstairs to get my coffee. So yeah, we'll get a fair more number of questions in here before we wrap up for today. Okay, I need to actually read these out loud instead of just like sitting here just reading these to myself. Alexander, a regular around here. Were there Catholics in medieval Europe who were against the wars on Cathars, Hussites, and so on? Yeah, definitely. The Southern French nobility were definitely against the Cathar Wars, but not because they were in favor of Catharism. That's an interesting thing. I mean, everybody agreed that heresy, as it was viewed, was bad. The Southern French did not think that Catharism should be endorsed. Like, for example, the Count of Toulouse, they just thought that the crusade was kind of a two-bit sham by the French to invade and take over their territory. So, Colette Whitney, by the way, I do have a quick question. The Crusaders were men, not women, because my friends seem to think otherwise. Well, you mean like the fighters, right? Yeah. Yeah. People who actually fought in military campaigns in the Middle Ages, and really, I mean, just historically in general, were men. We have this image in modern TV shows and movies of kind of the woman warrior, and there are some examples of that in history, but it's just very, very rare. And definitely in the Crusades, I mean, yeah, the military forces were men. Like the Vikings, that's a good example. If you guys watch the show Vikings, they've got like women running around with shields and swords, and they're fighting. I mean, if you look at the scholars who study the Vikings in medieval Scandinavia, they'll tell you that that's not accurate. In fact, during the Viking siege of Paris in 885, we are told in the source material that when the Vikings went back to their camp, their women were waiting there and mocked them for their failure. So that right there is kind of just, I mean, it wasn't like there were women in the army, and then when they went back, once we could say, and so women did travel to the Holy Land. In fact, many, many women did go to the Holy Land with men. And in difficult situations, like emergency circumstances, women would fight. Like, women could play a very important role in some of these battles. Like in the Battle of Dorylaeum, we know that when the Turks were attacking and the Crusaders formed like a circle around the civilians, they were right on a water source, which was very important. Bohemond picked this water source to make their stand. Crucial that he did that. But then it was crucial that the women were brave enough. And, this is a terrifying situation. I mean, it's not like, la-di-da, just carrying water. I mean, there are arrows flying around. I mean, yeah, you're within this protective circle, but it's still dangerous. So these women were courageous and very brave, to be lugging water, in the heat all day long to keep the soldiers from toppling over of thirst. Okay, God, you guys have a lot of good questions here. All right, Sir Knight asks, was Robert of Sabla an advisor to King Richard? Was he killed at the Battle of Ascalon? He was a nobleman from, was he from Poitou? I don't remember exactly where, but he was, or I can't remember now. Somebody look it up. But yeah, Robert of Sabla was basically one of Richard's vassals, and he became the Grand Master of the Templars during the Third Crusade. And he died not too long after the Third Crusade. Excuse me. You guys have too many good questions. Let's get to some of these. God, all these good questions. So we've got, I don't think Zytron's gotten a chance to ask one yet. Did the Pope ever try to open a means of communication with the leaders of Islam to talk or negotiate? Or was it just the Crusaders on the ground that did that? I don't recall that. I don't think so. But don't quote me on that. We know that the Pope had long-running discussions with the Mongols. Like, that's famous. Embassies from the Pope to the Mongols back and forth. So I suppose it's not inconceivable. Walker Smith, do you think crusading in the Levant would have continued into the 1500s if Constantinople had not fallen in 1453 and land access to the Holy Land was not cut off? That's a tough question, but the big thing that happens in the late Middle Ages that kind of changes the trajectory of crusading is that these kingdoms all become a lot more centralized. The kings become a lot more powerful. The role of the church is diminished. The church is a lot weaker, or less politically powerful, I guess we should say. In the 15th century, we've kind of got this football match between the Spaniards and the French and the Holy Roman emperors for control of the papacy or influence over the church, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to know. There's such an emphasis on internal politics in this period. The people who needed to be committed to crusading just were not during this period, which is one of the reasons Constantinople falls in the first place. In the 12th century, you've got people like Richard the Lionheart, Frederick Barbarossa. In the 13th century, Louis IX. These are the most powerful men in Christendom who are deeply committed to crusading, and they do it. They lead these crusades. But in the late Middle Ages into the early modern era, there's a lot more. The people who are really committed to crusading are more small time, low-level knights or local lords or even members of the church, the Knights of St. John, for example. And also, to be fair, the landscape does change so much with Constantinople. So that is a good point you make, because suddenly now the battle is against this Ottoman Empire that has a presence in Europe, that is a direct threat to Europe. There's so much fighting against the Ottoman Turks during this period. But even then, it's mainly the powers that border the Ottomans that are committed to that. England and France are fighting each other. So that's the complaint of people like the Hungarians or the Poles. They're saying, how come, or the Greeks, how come they're just leaving us to fight this Ottoman powerhouse? Remember the Crusades? And people just weren't, there wasn't that emphasis on it during that period. But anyway, I'll stop rambling about that. That's my big problem, is I ramble with these questions. So let's do a couple more here. Here's a good comment from D about Richard III. Xenex, because the medieval conception was that royal authority came from imperial authority, would the Crusader states have been at least conceived of as de jure Holy Roman Empire or de jure Eastern Roman Empire? It just depends on who you asked. The Holy Roman Emperors probably would have viewed it that way. The Byzantines certainly viewed themselves as the legitimate claimants to much of the Crusader states. But I don't think, just to kind of put it simply, I don't think the French or the English ever saw themselves as subject to the Holy Roman Emperor in any meaningful way. Not even in theory, because for them, like for the kings of France, for example, they were the rightful heirs to Charlemagne. Both France and the Empire. Germany and France were both part of Charlemagne's domain. So Charlemagne is the founder of both, the Kingdom of France and the Holy Roman Empire in that respect. All right, guys, I appreciate everybody being here. Let's get a few more questions here. Let's get some more questions. I'm going to look for a few people who haven't asked questions yet. Oh, here we go. A good comment from Sam, kind of addressing the Constantinople thing. And Sam's an expert in the Ottoman Empire, so this is some good information here. The popes continued to organize coalitions against the Ottomans after the fall of Constantinople. They just didn't refer to them as crusades as such. And yeah, that's interesting. At times they did, though. The popes were definitely issuing crusade bulls during this period. The last crusade bull to be issued was actually during the Vienna Crusade, so the 1683. the end of the 17th century. But yeah, often they had the terminology was a little bit different, like Holy League or something like this. So good point, Sam. And this is interesting. Getting back to the woman warrior thing, Flack says, right now I can only think of Joan of Arc as a woman warrior of the Middle Ages. Yeah, and the whole thing with Joan is Joan kind of points to this really interesting concept in the medieval world of God kind of using the meek, the humble to do great things. Joan is a simple country girl. God places her in command of the armies of the Kingdom of France. I mean, this speaks to the Christian sensibilities of the period. That where kings will fail, God's humble servants, the meek, the mild, will succeed. So, and Joan, she put on armor and she was kind of a figurehead in the army, but did she herself ride out, in a line of cavalry and, swing a sword? As far as I know, she did not. So, all right, let's do one or two more questions and then we'll say goodbye for now. And also, everybody, Sam is going to do, in part of my new live stream series, it's going to go all through May through July. Sam's going to be with us on Friday. Let's look at that date. Friday the 12th. And that one's not going to be an evening stream. That's going to be noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time. And we're going to do Ask Me Anything about the Ottoman Empire. So that'll be fun with Sam. We'll have Sam on to give us all kinds of information about the Ottomans. All right. So yeah, here we got Welsh Muslim Dave saying that Joan of Arc concept you mentioned, using meek and mild people to do great things, is very biblical. For example, King David. Exactly. Yeah. Or for that matter, Jesus himself. I mean, Jesus, he was not a warrior king or somebody who came at the head of an army. He was the son of a carpenter who died for the sins of the world. So that's, kind of interesting. And I had something else I wanted to add to that, but it just slipped my mind. Oh, well. Oh, it was this. I think we kind of forget how important the Old Testament was in the Middle Ages. In some ways, I almost wonder if the Old Testament aspect of the Bible wasn't even more influential in especially like in areas of law and how people viewed the way that society should be organized. I mean, the old kings of Israel, the Israelite kings, were such a, like King David, were such a powerful image for medieval kings. Okay, let's do one more question, and then I'm going to get back to work on my video. Okay. Somebody said the audio is kind of coming in and out. Has everybody been having trouble with the audio? If that's the case, I'm sorry about that. I'll try to fix that next time. Okay, let's do one more question. All right. All these fascinating questions. Let's go with Simonius. The answer to your question is no. This is a good one from Jonathan Phelps. Were there nuns who marched with armies as nurses and cooking for the army? Yeah, there were definitely women. Like, we know that some of the few women that Richard the Lionheart would allow on campaign were washerwomen, because it was so important to maintain cleanliness within the army. So those women were certainly allowed to be a part of the marching column. Oh, and this is interesting here too. Not to jump to another question, but well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Sergius Fidenas says, for example, the second wife of Robert Guiscard. Right. Okay. So Robert Guiscard, what he's talking about is this famous passage from Anna Karenina, where she talks about the wife of Robert Guiscard. Was her name Sigelgaita? I think that was it. She was a Lombard noblewoman. Anna Karenina talks about her, and of course, Robert Guiscard was the famous Norman leader of southern Italy, a mortal enemy of the Byzantines. Anna's whole thing is to portray Robert and Sigelgaita and really all of the Westerners as a bunch of savage barbarians. And so she portrays Sigelgaita as wearing armor, riding out into battle alongside her husband with like her hair streaming out. You know, she's this crazy warrior woman who is, you know, egging on the barbarian hordes. And of course, this is a memorable image, and people have referenced this idea ever since then, but you can't take it seriously because Anna she's doing the Byzantine thing where she's pretending that the Byzantine Empire is the Roman Empire during the era of Julius Caesar, and that these are the Celts, these are the barbarians. By this point, Westerners were not the barbarians of, you know, the first century AD. They were, you know, at the civilizational level of the Byzantines. And in some cases, they had wealthier societies. So this is Anna deliberately kind of painting a picture that is misleading. I have no doubt. If I had to bet money, I would never bet that Sigelgaita actually put on armor. Like she put on a Norman hauberk and rode out there alongside her husband. I think she was a late 11th century Norman noblewoman, and she looked and behaved like one. Doesn't mean she wasn't a strong personality. I'm sure she was. In fact, I'm positive she was. She was Lombard, by the way, not Norman. But, you know, she was married to an important Norman ruler. So, but that's a good example. And that's another thing, too. Often when we read about, like, for example, when the Romans talk about women warriors, they're always talking about their enemies. And it's a way of saying that your enemies are barbaric. At that time, that's how it was viewed. You know, a sign of barbarism was if your enemy had their women with them, you know, swinging hammers and shields and screaming and stuff. I mean, wow, look at these crazy barbarians with their crazy women out there fighting alongside them. It's kind of a, you know, so it's something that you can't really, you just have to like understand that this is perspective being presented by that author. So anyway, thanks very much, guys. We had fun. We'll do this again next week. We do this every Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Hopefully that's not trademarked, but I'll see you guys again next Tuesday, and we'll do some more coffee in the Crusades. Goodbye for now.